Should I start? All right, you can see from the top slide, and make sure you're in the right webinar. And we really thank you for joining us for Meet Your Brownfield Team, which will be followed by an EPA Multipurpose Assessment Cleanup and Revolving Loan Fund, or MARC, grant update. The FY 2022 guidelines were just released yesterday, so you're going to be the first to hear about changes and what we expect. I'm Jean Hammerman. I'm the Executive Director of the Center for Creative Land Recycling, or CCLR, and it is my pleasure to welcome you today on behalf of the CCLR team. This webinar brings together brownfield practitioners from EPA Region 10, which includes Idaho, Alaska, Washington, Oregon, and tribal communities. We hope you'll be an active participant in the state breakout rooms. That's why we chose the Zoom platform, because most of you are probably familiar with it by now. And we hope you'll take away two things from this webinar. The first is information about support services and resources for brownfield redevelopment in your communities. And second, a list of people you can call at CCLR and EPA and Groundwork, your state environmental agency or colleagues that you meet in the breakout room. Next. So I'm going to briefly introduce you to CCLR and the CCLR team before passing it to EPA. CCLR has been championing the beneficial reuse of environmentally impacted and underutilized properties for over 23 years. We've been EPA's technical assistance to brownfield, or TAB, provider for Region 10 for over a decade. Many of you know CCLR and may have worked with Ignacio de Rite on your projects. We're thrilled that we will be the TAB provider for another 5 years, and we hope to see many projects go through to completion during this time. We remain committed to our mission to promote the sustainable, equitable, and responsible reuse of environmentally impacted properties. Next. Here's how we work with land practitioners. We answer your questions about the redevelopment process. We organize webinars on diverse topics, and once upon a time, we held in-person workshops, which we hope to bring back in 2022. We've trained tens of thousands of practitioners in the last decade. We send newsletters with information about grants, news, and workshops. If you aren't getting our newsletters directly, you need to sign up, and we'll put that link in the chat. I'm sure everybody can take a moment to find the chat, and there'll be a variety of different resources that will be posted there during this webinar. We also review your EPA MARC grant applications. It raises your chances of success, and we've brought in millions of dollars into Region 10. Next. We've assembled a really talented team to support you. Here is our operations and communications team, Rachel and Claire and Devin and Annika, and they're all on this webinar and looking forward to facilitating our state breakout rooms. Next. Here are our technical assistance delivery team, and they really are as friendly as they look. And more importantly, they have specialized knowledge that can be useful for you. You can best access them through the Ask the Expert link, which you'll see in the chat. This way we can direct your questions to the specialist best able to assist you. Many of you already know Ignacio, as I indicated. There's Joelle and Ellie and Denise and Paul. I'm now going to pass the program to Susan Morales, Land Revitalization and Brownfield Coordinator for EPA Region 10, to share information from EPA.
Thank you, Jean. Thank you, everyone, for joining us today. I will have to say I appreciate CCLR hosting this event. They are definitely a key partner, along with all of you in the communities, in trying to and working to address brownfields. I just have a couple of quick slides, but I was hoping my team from the EPA side would go ahead and show themselves, really, do a flash preview of your faces before we get going here. And I can't. Okay, so I'm going to get going here. Oh, there we go. Thank you. Yeah, so we've got a few people. Everybody that's on EPA can just do a wave. That way we can see you guys. Great. Thanks, everyone. So if we can go back to the slides, there's a lot of creativity that built this program to address the issues communities were facing with contaminated sites. We are one of 10 regions through the Environmental Protection Agency. You can see us up there in the kind of a gold creamy fall color. We cover the 4 states that were mentioned before, and here's a map of all the different regions. And we certainly have a huge dedication and effort to serve our tribal nations. Next slide. Just another way of viewing our state. We try and have state representatives as much, or people placed co-located in there. Right now we have Molly Vaughn out of the Anchorage office, Margaret Olson out of the Portland office. We don't have anybody yet placed in Idaho, but we have a lot of dedicated staff out of the Seattle office who go where they're needed under non-COVID restricted times. And so next slide. So just from top to bottom, I think we lost a little bit of the formatting here. Yeah, so we've got Madison Sanders Curry. You might have heard her speak. She is our State and Tribal Response Program lead, and she handles a lot of the technical stuff for our program on the Alaska side. We've got Terry Griffith. I'm pretty sure if you've been dealing with us at all, you've heard her name. She's been a stalwart person on the team along with me here, at least in Region 10, and she is our point person, our lead for the competitive grants, which we often refer to as the MAC, the ARC, and the MARC, and I'll go into more on what that stands for if you don't know. She is any point, you can ask her any brownfield competitive grant program questions. Then we've got Margaret Olson down in our Portland office serving the communities in Oregon, serving as the Oregon liaison. She also wears many hats. A couple of them are related. One is related to RCRA and the other one related to renewable resources. And she has a passion. So if you've got any ideas about reusing a site and bringing renewable resources to it, she's the person to talk to. She's got the energy and the connections to make that happen. The next one on our list is Blair Kinzer. He is actually on loan to us from the Corps. He loves the cleanup grants. He loves everything cleanup, and he's actually on leave, but we have him coming back in the next couple of weeks, maybe 10 days or so from family leave. So there's his contact information. Let us know if you have questions before then, but he should be available in the next couple of weeks. Angel Ip, she is newer to our program, but not new to EPA, and has a strong history in tribal solid waste. Is currently serving as the job training lead, or it was previously known as the environmental workforce development and job training lead. And she loves to learn. So any conversation with her is usually very welcome. There's myself, my contact information, Molly Vaughn, our newest team member to join us, also willing to learn about brownfields and your challenges, and is covering also things within Alaska. The next two folks, can't really see it right there, but so we've got Bjorn Frogner and Chuck Pink, who serve as our senior environmental employees and support our staff. And then missing from there, which is probably really important, if you get really upset with us, you can contact Melissa Winters and give her some feedback on our performance. But not in jest, she's definitely willing to hear your ideas about the program and the program staff at any point. So I think that's it for us for the introductions. Thank you.
Thank you, Susan. That was really helpful information, and we are going to be sending out these slides so people will have those contact information of the people you've introduced to us. And we really value our collaboration with you and your team. One of the questions came up was about the National Brownfields Conference. And I don't know if you have anything else to add, but as of now, it is an in-person event on December 8th in Oklahoma City. It runs for a couple of days, and we will provide the link for registration for more program information on the National Brownfields Conference in the chat as well. Next, we're going to hear from Jaleesa Gilmore, who's the Manager and Equity Resilience Programs Officer for our Groundwork USA. Groundwork does cutting-edge environmental justice work under an EPA Equitable Development and Environmental Justice and Brownfields Communities Technical Assistance Grant. CCLR is a sub-awardee on the grant and partners with Groundwork to provide technical assistance and develop workshops We invited them so you could meet their team and hear about their resources. Jaleesa?
Great. Thank you, Jean, and thank you to the whole CCLR team for inviting me to share Groundwork USA's technical assistance resources that we provide. I am Jaleesa Gilmore. I'm a manager of equity and resilience programs at Groundwork USA. Groundwork USA is a national network of 22 local community organizations called Trust throughout the country, all working to advance health, equity, and resilience in their communities. And so based predominantly in low to moderate income neighborhoods and communities of color, these communities have a disproportionate amount of brownfields, environmental contamination and pollution, as well as a lack of environmental amenities like trees and parks. And so working hand in hand with residents through meaningful community engagement, Groundwork is working to transform the natural and built environment of these communities from within. And we can actually skip the next slide. Skip that slide. And so, like I mentioned, we're part of a network of 22 trusts around the country, many of whom do brownfield work, restoring these spaces into public assets like urban farms, community gardens, educational spaces, and parks. And so these projects are designed to ensure that the community is central to every aspect of the development process, ensuring equity and inclusive and meaningful engagement. You may be asking yourself, what's the link between brownfields and environmental justice and equity? Why are we talking about it in these terms? And the reason is because, one, equitable development helps to right the history of injustice. Historical harm and past policy failures have shaped the lived experiences and physical environments of so many of the communities we're working in. So the disinvestment, the marginalization, and the limited access to opportunities that led to brownfields being disproportionately located in these communities are the conditions that we're engaging with and working with today. And so equitable development is a way to recognize and repair past harms and recognize that these communities know what's best for them to move forward. It also is a way to respond to community needs. It speaks to the reality in communities instead of perceptions. And Trust have projects that focus on utilizing vacant or blighted land to really meet pressing community needs, whether that's combating food insecurity, flooding an urban heat island, or filling the gaps for recreational and job training needs. And then lastly, it leads to wiser, stronger, stable solutions. And you can see from this photo, which is from our trust in Lawrence, Massachusetts, this really highlights the massive potential that a former brownfield site has with the right team, alignment, resources, and patience. And so Groundwork Trust have shown that when people work together and build a shared vision for the future, massive policy, regulatory, and social change can occur. And so we're lucky enough to receive generous funding from the EPA to offer equitable development technical assistance so we can share our knowledge and our resources with communities throughout the country. So we offer a visual resource library of guides to demonstrate community engagement and aspects of the redevelopment process. We also offer a series of workshops and trainings to build local capacity for incorporating equitable development and environmental justice principles into brownfield projects. And then lastly, we also provide direct technical assistance to clients nationwide based on their self-identified needs as they relate to a few key areas. And so next slide. So for our resource library, we already developed a number of ready-to-go tools and resources that are available on our website, and we'll constantly be updating that through the year. And these are just some examples on the right of resources that we have available. So we have a brownfields to parks guide, a best practices and action plans. We even have a graphic novel style guide, and they all center on equity and justice. We also used to offer in-person workshops and virtual webinars as well. And so we'll have about 12 this year on trainings on equitable development and environmental justice. And last month we held our first one that focused on community development done right, putting environmental justice and equity into action. And I'll go to the next slide. And so lastly, I mentioned we also offer direct one-on-one client technical assistance for communities with brownfields throughout the country. And so we work with municipalities, nonprofits, community groups, as well as multi-stakeholder partnerships. And that's just what the map on the left is showing. And I'll go to the next slide and share some examples of our technical assistance. And yeah, we can just click through all of them. And so, yeah, we focus on building capacity to integrate equity and environmental justice into brownfield planning. We also focus on community engagement. How do we build leadership and decision-making into the brownfield process? Also thinking about how are we thinking about brownfield redevelopment in terms of climate change. The list is on there. I won't go through all of them right now. And then we can go to the next slide. Oh, and then also to mention that we have a partnership with CCLR to provide technical assistance for, all their expansive knowledge for just to fill some of the gaps that Groundwork USA can help better assist our clients. And so I just want to briefly introduce you to the team. The first person is Kate Mangoya, the Director of Capacity Building. She's based in Boston, Massachusetts. Then there's John Ballanch, also based in Boston, and he's another manager of equity and resilience. And then there's me, who's in New York City, also a manager of equity and resilience programs. And we have a form that you can fill out and share about your brownfield project. And that's the best way to contact us in addition to our email, so we can reach out and help you figure out what's the best type of resources that we can provide to your brownfield project. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jaleesa. I'm going to take over here for a moment before we jump into breakouts. I'll stop sharing my screen. So the way that this is going to work, I'm just going to show you really quickly so you can see how breakouts are going to function. So I'll go ahead and share my screen to show you what we'll be using. We will be using Jamboard for collaboration. So when you get into your breakouts, your breakout facilitator, a member of the CCLR team, will share a link with you through the chat. You will click on that link and then it will open your state-specific breakout Jamboard. Okay, there are 2 slides here with a total of 4 questions. Your CCLR team member will facilitate discussion around these 4 questions. You can add your input and your questions and your thoughts through clicking on this button over here in the left, the sticky note button. You're going to click on that. You're going to type something like, okay, and then you're going to click save, and then a sticky note has been added. You can click on it and move it where you want, okay, and you can resize it. Don't make it that big. You can resize it, and people will add on, and you can all see this at the same time, so it's a really great way to collaborate. So that is how that is going to work. And I do recommend that when you do this, you split your screen so that you have the Jamboard on your right and the Zoom meeting on your left, so that you can see people as you're working through the Jamboard. Okay, I think we are going to get started. I'm going to send you all to breakout rooms now. If you don't get sent to a breakout room automatically, just hold on a second. I will send you manually in a moment.
We hope you enjoyed your meeting in your breakout rooms. I was just looking at our Jamboard and it is full of comments. A lot of our comments in Washington State was about financing. We learned a lot about the EPA and state resources. What I really appreciated is both the focus on the funding and the stakeholder relationships. Those are really both important to marry. But I loved at the end, we had Terry from Spokane speak up and say, I'm here to help. If I've already, run a number of EPA grants, if you need help, contact me. And it's that kind of collaboration and making yourselves available. It takes a village to redevelop these projects, and everyone who can be of support to those and give a hand to those that are coming up and are in different stages of development, please make yourself available. That's what makes this industry so special, is really the relationships and the trust that we've developed. So I really want to thank our state partners in particular for their participation. It really was valuable having you, in that breakout and sharing your comments and resources with us. Before I pass the program to Ignacio and Susan, I just want to run through some upcoming opportunities for you to engage. So Claire is going to share her screen again, and I'm just running through a couple of things that you again, don't need to take note of because you're going to get a copy of the PowerPoint, but things that you'll want to put on your radar. The redevelopment rodeo. I really am not much for the bunking Bronco kind of language we use to promote the redevelopment summit. You know, I'm not a spur kind of girl, having grown up in New York City, but I've seen the value to municipalities who have applied to pitch a site at the National Brownfields Conference. This will be our 3rd year, and I really encourage you to consider applying. 3 communities around the country will be selected, and if you're selected, you're going to receive up to $10,000 in pro bono support through the National TAB network. So you need to be willing to go to Oklahoma, but you can see Sarah Silas, our past executive director, in her cowgirl hat there. But it's really been, it's a valuable experience to fill out the application as well as to work with us on developing your pitch and to present the pitch to a group of experts. And we look forward to getting your applications or answering any questions about it. Please make note, September 29th, a webinar by Kansas State University on their Enviro Atlas tool, which is an interactive map and data tool to evaluate community assets and to tell stories. So please note that, and again, this will be sent out to you and you'll have that information in your chat. Next, 2 webinars by the Redevelopment Academy. First, Risky Business, Overcoming Challenges to Attracting Investment at Brownfield Sites on October 15th. And Show Me How, Redevelopment, Brownfields Redevelopment in Economically Distressed Areas on November 19th. So make note of those as well. Lastly, take a moment to follow up with us, like us, follow us, join us, connect with us on social media. I just want to take one moment to call out Claire Weston, our program and operations manager, who's waving to you now, who has been the force behind this in terms of organizing it, and I want to thank her. I also want to make sure you know Rachel Ross, our communications manager, who coordinates our newsletter. If you have a newsworthy item for our newsletter or other information that you'd like to share with us in our newsletter, be in touch with Rachel. In closing, I just want to acknowledge that it's really been a difficult 1.5 years and continues to be for many, but that your continued commitment to building healthier and resilient communities informs and inspires us. And we really thank you for your work. We hope you'll reach out to CCLR. We are your go-to resource for all things revitalization, and we'll meet you where you're at and direct you to where you need to go. So without further ado, I am passing it now to Ignacio and Susan for the second half of our presentation, which will cover the MAC grant update. Thank you.
Thank you, and good morning still. I got kicked off the internet for a second, so I think I'm back on. I'm going to share my screen now, and Susan will be covering the first few slides, and I will follow up, but just so share my screen here. Come on. Oh. Sorry, it's okay. Share my screen. Can you make me a co-host? All right, now I'm a co-host. And here we are. All right, can people see my screen? Thumbs up. Yes, I think people can see my screen. So, Susan, take it away.
Hi, everyone. So I'm gonna start this, and Ignacio's gonna tie in some other things at the end here. So we're really just gonna cover, a high level what brownfields are. I think some of you have some sense. We'll just reiterate it. I'll cover the basics of what our competitive grants start for, what they can be used for. I'm gonna try and do it in 101 seconds and explain the whole MARC part. And then lead in with the high level big changes for this coming fiscal year, federal fiscal year of 2022. And Ignacio will tie everything up with the must-dos. Next slide. Just so that we're all starting from the same page, brownfields is a term that can be used for any property that has issues that need to be assessed or be addressed, and then lead to reuse of that site. The formal definition is here in front of you, and really, it's we look at a lot of things to make sure that sites are eligible for our competitive program. But brownfields are essentially any property, whether it's the structure, the land it sits on, where you think there's contamination, or there's contamination and you need to do some work to get it into a reuse state, revitalized for the community. We're also looking, those properties are assets to the community once they can be addressed by the environmental concerns. That's what our funding does. And there's lots of incentives that can be used for the work, the pre-work at the site, and then also into the redevelopment. Land recycling, reuse, or redevelopment is another way that we're looking at it. Sometimes there isn't a structure, you just need to address what's there. It can be abandoned, vacant, or even underutilized. Sometimes that's not in the best interest of the community. And so, our real goal is tying all the resources from our federal program with the state and local tools to get you into address these properties into beneficial reuse. Next slide. Yeah, so the main programs that we have are what we call multi-purpose, assessment, revolving loan fund, and cleanup. This is why you hear it called MARC. There are a couple of programs that alternate every other year. Multi-purpose and the revolving loan fund are one of those. So that's sometimes why you have a MAC year or an ARC year. Who are we if we don't come up with some acronyms? Guidelines, as Jean mentioned at the very beginning, were just released yesterday. The deadline for these competitive grants for the fiscal 2022 cycle is December 1st. So it'll come quicker than we know. Next. And so really, what can the funds be used for? Well, we'll start with assessment activities. We're talking about environmental site assessments. What's the historical use? What are the potential contaminants? Your phase 1, your phase 2, getting in there, testing the soil, figuring out the contaminants on the structure as well. And what are the risks? And all this is really based on, what you think you want to do with the property, what you think the vision is. And so those types of planning activities are also allowed because they go hand in hand. There is some ability to use funding for program management. Program management is really key. And so there's a little bit of relief there. And then, going back to the planning activities, it can be very broad. In the sense that you can have planning activities, so how you're going to engage the community in outreach. What is the land use going to be used for? And if you need market studies to kind of layer that information so that what the infrastructure is going to issues are, what the potential interest it is in for how it's zoned. All those things can play a role into it. So those planning activities are also allowed. Next. Then once you've got it, all the vision established, the planning established, and that's kind of the ideal situation, you're now ready to clean up. 13 million tagged for this year. Cleanup activities, it could still include some cleanup planning as you can with the assessment, but really a lot of people want to leverage that money, want to go ahead and remove the soil, abate the buildings. Health monitoring is also a key component, especially if you're in an area where there's more density and individuals living there that could be impacted. Monitoring of the contamination and any post cleanup, and then enforcement of those institutional controls, should that be part of the remediation plan, are also allowed. And then environmental insurance, and there are different types of environmental insurance that can be applied, but the funding can be used to cover that too. Next. Revolving Loan Fund this year is a revolving loan fund year. This is really a money to build a program to serve as like a bank, right? To capitalize revolving loans, and there's the opportunity to sub-grant to do cleanup activities. And so the expectation is you're building a program with, you can have flexibility in the fees or the set interest or whatever the terms are, but that you're going to get some of the funding back repaid, and that's your program income. So then you can build even a larger pool to do cleanup work. And here is just the general outline of the roadmap for your community revitalization. You know, and many of you know this, you've got to plan, you've got to engage the community, you've got to know who the stakeholders are and your partners, both in the assessment and also into the redevelopment, and sometimes that usually changes. Identify brownfields. We often talk about brownfield inventory, like what is the landscape for the sites that you're addressing, and then leveraging. This program cannot be done without leveraging, even if it's from the partners or other programs. And so then you address the risks, and that's what phase one's environmental site assessments and phase two provide you, as well as cleanup planning. And if cleanup is necessary, sometimes you can have a phase one and the site can move on. So sometimes, you know, things don't have to go the full cleanup phases in order to get to revitalization. But leverage funds, leverage partnership, both the federal, state, local, and the private sector.
Yeah, and I just like to add the yellow portion. That's generally what you can use the assessment grants for. The kind of pink location there is where squares. That's what you can use cleanup grants and RLF for, and blue, that's everything else. So that's a simple comic of graph of what how these funds work.
Yeah, I can appreciate that. I like that. So the guidelines were just posted. There are significant changes that have been made. We used to offer assessment grants that were for coalitions. This year, there will not be the opportunity for coalitions to gather to do the assessment grants. There is a new larger size program this year for community-wide assessment. States and tribes are eligible. And the real thinking behind that is that, and also the native corporations in Alaska. And the thinking behind that is that we've got a lot of communities who just don't have the bandwidth to handle some of these projects. And a larger entity like a state or a tribe serving a larger area with multiple brownfield issues, or corporations for sure with larger areas, can have that ability to provide those services to those communities for the assessment work. It's up to $2 million, and it's over a 5-year project period. So there's plenty of time to get that work in. We will have community-wide assessment grants with a limit of $500,000 for that. And then RLF, that's the RLF year, only eligible to those who do not have an open cooperative agreement, a revolving loan fund cooperative agreement, and are not part of like another existing open RLF coalition. Those would be brand new communities looking to build their capacity for cleanups. And then for those existing revolving loan fund programs, like you've heard today, we've got one with Washington Commerce and Business Oregon. And there's still one with Portland, although theirs might be subject to close pretty soon here. They can request supplemental funding to build their program from EPA. And so there's still the thought that that should be will be offered, but more information to come in the spring. We know the dates, and the information can be gathered on the EPA Brownfields webpage. There are dates to train you through or walk you through the guidelines. October 13th at 1 o'clock Eastern, which is what, 10 o'clock on Pacific or 9 in Alaska, if I did that calculation right. And they're going to talk through The community assessment, there is still the opportunity for site specific. If you have just one site in mind, there's the opportunity to learn more about that. The cleanup grant solicitation and also the revolving loan fund, that's Wednesday. On Thursday, the 14th, there'll be a webinar for this new state and tribal up to $2 million community wide assessment grant. So I think that's it for me, right?
Thank you, Susan. And Susan can answer questions later, and we've also been answering questions in the chat. And so, again, starting early, this is the housekeeping, and you want to have a nice orderly house before and while you're preparing these grants. So if you don't have a DUNS and SAMS registration, and you're working with others, and especially those who will be uploading the grant, you want to get into grants.gov and look over, and EPA has a FAQ on how to work with grants.gov. Review the guidelines, they just came out, and the frequently asked questions. 99% of your questions were probably answered by the frequently answered questions, and we can supplement that. I mean, it's a very long document, so we can help you go understand the frequently asked answered questions. Now, clearly, you're asking for you have programs and projects related to revitalization. It could be the economy, it could be renewable energy, it could be community development, it could be restoration. That's your project, and you have to look at how that might feel work with a brownfields grant. The grants are there as a tool. Don't want to get a grant just for the heck of it. You have a program and you have plans, you have partners, and you have to work together to create a work plan, work with your partners and stakeholders, and so that you can create a good budget and leverage money that you can't find from the EPA. And really, the brownfields grants are just the seed of whatever you're doing. It can help jumpstart any kind of program, but eventually you'll have to look for money elsewhere. And you have to tell that story, how what your goals are, and how the brownfields will help you get there. And along the way, you'll need to gather information, get data to back it up, work with your partners so you can have a good story, and work with CCLR so we can help you get there. So what does starting early mean as far as a plan, a program, or a project? Again, define your program or project in the context of the community, regional, or other plans. Some states have broad plans that cover many aspects of how they govern. For instance, many states have housing programs, they have renewable energy programs, conservation, and it varies across the state. So each state is different, and different regions within a state also take these and have their own initiatives, and different local governments or communities or tribes have their own local plans that also tie in with this. Not all initiatives that a local government might want or a tribe might want is addressed by a state. Sometimes you have to look at what the EPA program's doing or what other federal departments are doing and figure out how you might fit in and how you can bridge the gap between what your state isn't providing and how you want to get there. For instance, there are some states with climate sustainability plans or climate action plans. There are many cities that have that, and some cities and states don't. Same thing with housing. Many cities have housing elements or a consolidated plan, and some don't. Economic development, there's what's called the Comprehensive Economic Development Strategy through the EDA. That's a typical program. And of course, very recently, diversity and equity programs. And you heard groundwork. And if you want to devise a program where you're looking at diversity, equity, and all the other factors here, then you certainly want to consult with groundwork and with CCLR. And then, of course, infrastructure and land use. The whole gamut, brownfields grants all over the country address these in different ways. You don't need all of these, but if you can tie these ideas together in your grant application, you have a better chance of succeeding. Then you have to connect these with your neighborhoods and your land assets. These apply locally. Brownfields is, after all, a program that refers to the land. So you have to work with the neighbors, the community, and the land that's there. And if there are underutilized properties, these are your opportunities to connect your goals through the Brownfields program. And how do you do this? Well, you have to identify your outcomes and your outputs. And so, what are these magic words? Well, big picture outcomes and what the measures are you hope that your brownfields efforts will yield. So again, you have your big picture goal, but how do you get there? Your big picture goal is your outcome. This could be, you might have a housing issue. You want to develop a certain number of units. You might want to develop parks or create jobs. You might have a stress environment that causes ill health, or other things that are disadvantage your community. You might have inequality or really not have access to certain services, or you may have a community that needs more revenue. Uh, and then you have to find leveraging to attain these goals. So these might be your outcomes of what your community wants to do generally, and you can use a your brownfields project or program outputs, and measure how these will be in order to reach those outcomes. For instance, in terms, if you're thinking about housing, you need to put housing on sites. So maybe you say, I'll assess X number of sites and clean up Y number of sites so I can use them for housing or for parks or for economic development uses. To get there, you might need to do outreach. So you have to, your output might include community meetings, uh, you know, a number of stakeholders reached in order to reach those outputs. And also, you have to produce reports, articles, or other things that spread your goals, the outputs of your program. So this is a brief, one slide of the big picture of what you have to do as far as outcomes and outputs, because this is a very big factor in the grant application. So here are samples. A benefit to public welfare. Many grant applications are abstract, kind of anyone can claim they can do this. For instance, someone might say, right down in the grant application, they want to put in more affordable housing, or they want to eliminate the food desert. Well, it's better in your grant application to be concrete, something that relates locally to your community. For instance, it will increase in the production of affordable units in your community, or will create urban agriculture sites and partnerships to eliminate a food desert. Or for public health, some people just say it'll become healthier. Well, you have to be more specific. Can you decrease asthma by encouraging infill of walkable neighborhoods, or providing opportunities for recreation? For the environment, you can be so abstract and say reduce threats to residents and reduce blight. Well, for that, you basically say you're going to assess a certain number of sites and clean up a certain number of sites in partnership, and bring retail recreation to so many sites. So this is how you are more active in your grant application. For the economy, some people basically write it will improve opportunities for the economy. Well, you want to be more specific. How many jobs do you think, based on the square footage per 1,000 square feet, or same thing for housing? How many housing units per acre? Those kinds of ideas, and as well as how you can create opportunities. You can leverage other funds, like leveraging an opportunity zone, or energy grants from the state, or financing. So these are, when you're thinking about a grant, be more specific, and you have better chances of being more competitive. Starting early again with reuse goals. You need a vision for the site. I referred to this already. They should tie in with your area plans, the region, other plans. Do you have to create one, or do you have to work with others to create one? Who are the stakeholders? What are the economic, community, and environmental needs, and how you catalyze the reuse? And then again, you match these to your neighborhoods and your sites. Uh, and then you define your work plan, work with partners, create a good budget, tell your story very well. And one thing you should do is this is like a 10-minute primer here. EPA will have those two webinars, but also attend your regional webinars because you might have a different approach. What happens in New York, New Jersey area is very different from what we do in Oregon or Alaska or Idaho or Alaska or Oregon. What did I miss? Idaho. Here are a few key websites. The FAQs have a lot. The MARC grant applications webinars will have a lot of these. But these are the good first starts. If you want to see what an application looks like, go to the KSU tab, go click on resources, and in the categories drop down, look at the most recent year examples of the grant applications. If you need help, if you're the kind of person who is kind of like fill in the blanks, answering questions, go to the tab tools. But be sure to edit and reformat these because this is not the tab easy, as they call it, isn't well suited to squeezing in information into a grant application. This is very new, the Justice for Initiative. This round is very heavy on environmental justice and climate. And so review that. There's a section there, section 223, that basically outlines what that is about. And here, there are a few links here to health and data, which is probably the biggest hurdle in tying the impacts of brownfields to the economy or to health or access to food, housing, and many other things. So there's EJ Screen. That's heavily recommended now that you look at that. So scan that. EJ Screen is not available, I think, in some of the islands. So you might have to come with proxies for the EJ Screen. Just a word about stakeholders. Again, there's a laundry list of possible stakeholders, but don't forget, you need a champion. And sometimes that's the hardest thing to do. Someone has to be driving this. It's very difficult to get a state or maybe even a city person to be the champion because their plate is full. They have other things and other things to do. So you might need a local champion. And of course, connect with your state and regional EPA brownfields. Contact them early, especially for threshold and eligibility questions. You can ask CCLR, but we'll always default to EPA Region 10 for eligibility questions. A word about environmental consultants. This is new, even stronger this year, is they must be hired using federal procurement rules. It must be a fair and open competition. And contractors that develop or draft specifications, requirements, statements of scopes of work, and invitations to bids or RFPs must be excluded from competing from such procurement. So that's kind of verbatim from the guidelines. And if you have any more questions about that, the best people to reach out to are EPA or your local procurement office. CCLR might have opinions, but you can default to them. And of course, don't forget to contact CCLR for your review. Our reviews are free. We turn them around very quickly. We increase your chances 50% or more. I think we actually double your chances if you review your grant application twice or more, then your chances increase. Start early. Think big and beyond because these grants, especially for those $2 million state grants, you have to think big and beyond because many of these grants you need partnerships that cross beyond, what one state department does. You might need the energy department or the housing department or the parks department, not just your environment department. And if you're ready now, we'll be happy to review them. We're looking for one per, I guess one per region, or maybe a couple per region to review now. So be in early, and so that we can help you work on your grant application. So that is my presentation. You can reveal yourselves now and ask questions. So there are a bunch of questions here.
Yeah, and Ignacio, I saw a couple of things come up, at least one or two I can help respond to. One was a question about the amounts listed on the slides, if that would change if Congress seemed to pass anything in the interim. And we don't have a definite set rule on that. We go with the best information we have at the time that we are getting the guidelines out. Some things are subject to be more flexible and some things are not. So we just kind of go forward with what we know at the time. So we have to see. All of that is so questionable. And I think we had something. Oh, go ahead.
Okay, question here. What tips do you have community going for their second or third assessment grant? You want to take that first, Susan, or EPA?
Oh, well, okay. I think your information will be just as good, but really you've got to show success from your previous grants. You have to have been in good standing. We need to know you accomplished what you set out to accomplish. So that's something that'll probably be in the ranking more specifically with the opportunity to provide that. So that's a big piece. And then having really good plans for, what you're going to do now, given that you had that funding. So I'll stop there. How about you, Ignacio?
Yeah, well, I guess it depends. Some communities are big and they have different target areas. So, again, success, if you are applying for a new target area, that's great. If you're working with the same target area, you better have a good reason for asking for more money. Maybe you have more projects. Maybe you're building momentum. You've built momentum and you're building more. So again, the track record for success, leveraging, perhaps if you've had a redeveloped project in that area, those are all good tips for communities that keep coming back for more, because there are many communities that keep coming back for more. If you're successful, then and you can spread the wealth in your community, then do so. Okay, with the new state tribal assessment grant opportunity, how will success be measured?
I think there are a lot of similarities to the assessment grants. There is an emphasis on addressing, I believe it is 3 target areas. So you'll have to identify 3 areas, and how you define that. It can be larger versus smaller. And then I think 5 projects within that whole entirety of the grant. So I know that there are some specific goals with the funding that need to be met. And then, like with any of our grants, really good community engagement, strong, partnerships with key partners, and of course, from a project officer point of view, good reporting, good information into our database that tracks property profiles type information. So all that good stuff will still stand.
Question here about the assessment. If you have an assessment grant now, how much do they need drawn? And I think that's 70%, correct?
Yes.
Now, I have a follow-up to that. If I'm applying, let's say, for a different target area, I have assessment grant now and I'm applying for a different target area. Does that apply also?
So it's based on your cooperative agreement, regardless of what the focus was. Yeah, 70% drawn. And it needs to be well documented, right? It needs to be a process through the EPA system. And I don't know, is that Terry's voice? She wants to chime in?
Oh, I was just gonna jump in and just add a couple of things. So I added the summary of changes document in the chat, and that will be really important. I think Karen asked the question about success for the larger community-wide grants for states and tribes. And that's a really good document to highlight the specific criteria that will be for, there's specific criteria now for states. And then there'll be specific criteria depending on if you're applying for a community-wide as a state or tribe, or the kind of the other community-wides that are going up to 500,000. And then let's see, Susan, there was a question about the 70% drawdown. So for the kind of standard community-wide assessment grants that go up to the 500K, there's a specific requirement. If you're a current multi-purpose or assessment grant recipient, you have to have shown that you've drawn down 70% by October 1, 2021. And then if you're applying for the state and tribal up to $2 million large community-wides, that requirement is not in effect. So you do not need to show that for the larger community-wide grants for states and tribes. Lots of different variations. Feel free to reach out and to Region 10, to myself or Susan or Molly Bond with questions about the specifics of the eligibility. We're happy to answer any questions. We want to make sure you have that information before you take the time to prepare an application.
There's a question about a coalition grant, since there are none this year, but maybe an existing coalition has more projects still in their area. How would they would the coalition lead need some kind of jurisdiction outside their area?
Yeah, I'll start off. So without the coalition grants this year, it doesn't mean that there can't be a partnership. I think the ultimate challenge is, yes, you can go to a broader area, but you should have some hook, some jurisdiction to be able to support that. That said, nonprofits, are eligible, and sometimes they have really broad focus areas, similar for local governments. You've got some with larger focus areas, smaller, just some good planning with regards to what you think you want to address in that universe, and if you've got the right partners, and if you have some ability to serve that area. A lot of times, either nonprofits or local governments, they don't have a mandate to serve that larger area. So that would be something you would need to figure out.
Okay, a question here from Eric. Community engagements, how are they measured and graded, and especially for smaller communities or remote communities where there aren't very many people to engage with? How is that measured?
Yeah, I think you have some good advice on this, Ignacio. The main thing is you have to explain whatever you're doing, that it makes sense and then it's meaningful, right? So, especially with times changing with the COVID-19 restrictions, we're looking to see if you can engage the community, meaning you can get input from them, direction, buy-in. Sometimes you hold meetings and there were no comments. Well, that's less compelling than if you held a meeting, whether virtually or in person, and people say, oh, I like that idea, or they start giving you input. Well, did you check out the old structure down there? When you've got the community weighing in, that's the biggest success for showing, and how we would like to see it. And so that would be what you would go for as far as measurement. It's a two-way communication. So you can hold meetings, but are you getting something back?
Yeah, and again, COVID is, sometimes it helps, sometimes it hurts, because we can't be in person now. If your communities that are further apart can have remote meetings, the downside of that is connectivity is a big issue for certain communities. So, but if you have an opportunity, if your community is connected enough that you can do remote workshops, now's your chance, get on meetings, do a Jamboard like we did, get those ideas. But I think the other thing would be get some partners to commit to have a role in the project. Many grants, they just have a laundry list of people who provide support, but they don't really have a role. EPA does want to see a lot of other people having a role in the grant. Okay, is there another terrific way to engage people virtually that they'd recommend? Well, Eric Brewbreaker from Ponderay is here, so he can talk about the visioning we did for them, but there are many other examples. That's kind of a plug. It's on our website, so you can look at that.
Ignacio, this is Terry again. There's a really nice fact sheet that EPA put together on socially distant engagement ideas as well that I put in the chat box that folks can take a look at. And do reach out to Eric because he worked with all of you at CCLR and your consultants and did a fabulous job of engaging the community in the city of Ponderay, Idaho.
Let's see. A question here. Will the state contacts for the support letters just put their name in the chat so that people know who the contacts are for support letters? And again, we had this discussion in Alaska, smaller communities. If you need help finding partners, I think first reach out perhaps to your state, but CCLR is happy to help connect you all together, because if you find connections and issues and you're geographically perhaps have some proximity, especially out in Alaska, now's a chance to do it. It's a great opportunity to find a eligible entity to convince them to apply on your behalf.
And Ignacio, way further up, there was a question about examples through the Revolving Loan Fund program, the RLF program.
Yes.
And I did respond. I mean, some of your best examples of conversations would be had with the folks from the Washington Commerce program, or for Oregon, the Business Oregon program. They've been in the business of revolving loan funds for a long time, and a lot of great successes getting funding out to address contaminated sites from abandoned buildings to industrial sites so that there's a reuse. So there's a lot of good examples out there, probably also on our website.
Yes, and as far as RLFs, I mean, both Oregon and Washington are state RLFs, but local government and/or regional, eligible regional entities can be the lead in an RLF. And some of your states, your state departments might not be well situated to apply and run an RLF. So the time to discuss that and organize is now. So Kristen, maybe we can toss some ideas out. We've been trying to get Alaska to try to apply, but it's really hard in Alaska because I think your state, you have some state statute that makes it very difficult for some entities to apply.
And one big plug, and thanks to April McCoy from Zender Environmental, she says that they're a great resource there for the communities in Alaska. They are a recipient, among other things, other work, of the Environmental Workforce Job Training Program. And so any of the existing job training programs through the brownfield side would be a great partner. We still have one that's going to start kind of building momentum again with the city of Tacoma. We've had others throughout the region. You can just contact us, but that's an opportunity too.
Okay, so we're 1 minute to go. Any last thoughts? Or Jean, do you want to say anything? And thank you, Susan, again for co-hosting this section with me.
Thank you. The timing couldn't have been better with the release of the FY22 guidelines yesterday. So you've got the hot news off the press here. It's really been such a pleasure to host this. I really thank the CCLR staff, EPA, Groundwork, and all the state partners, and all of you for attending. As I said before, these are difficult times, and we really value the work what you've done and value our relationships with you. So we hope you now will have some new resources and feel invigorated to continue your work. And we will send out information from the Jamboards, from the chat, from all the other resources that we got. So stay tuned and look to that. Look forward to seeing you, and hopefully some of you at the National Brownfields Conference as well.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Keep in
Everyone
touch.
stay well.
Keep in touch.
Thank you.
Thank you.